Good evening, everyone. Good morning to you all, wherever you are around the world. And I know we had at least 101 person registered, so they will be joining us shortly. But nevertheless, let us get officially started on this International Society of Substance Use Professionals, ISSUP, Bahamas National Chapter, World Drug Day. And this is our interactive webinar. And before we get started, let's ask our treasurer, Miss Shaniqua Smith, to just open us up with a word of prayer. Shaniqua?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President. Let us pray. Sovereign God, we acknowledge you for who you are. We thank you for this opportunity that we can gather once again to disseminate information concerning those who need help. We ask you to bless this effort, bless those persons who are tuned into us, and we thank you for everything that will be done in decency and in order. In Christ's name we pray. Amen.
Good. Thank you very much for that inspirational prayer, Madam Chaplain. And yes, my name is Troy Clark, and I am the president of the Bahamas National Chapter of the International Society of Substance Use Professional. Now, let me just put out a caveat right now. Please note that this webinar is provided for informational purposes only and does not constitute medical or treatment advice. The views presented here are those of the speakers and not necessarily of ISSUP. And for those of you who do not know, ISSUP is the International Society of Substance Use Professional. Let me just welcome each and every one of you here this evening. And our theme for World Drug Day is People First, Stop Stigma and Discrimination, Strengthen Prevention. The world drug problem is a complex issue that affects millions of people worldwide. Many people who use drugs face stigma and discrimination, which can further harm their physical and mental health and prevent them from accessing the help they need. The United Nations Office on Drugs and Crimes, UNODC, recognizes the importance of taking a people-centered approach to drug policies with a focus on human rights, compassion, and evidence-based practices. The International Day Against Drug Abuse and Illicit Trafficking, or World Drug Day, is marked on 26th of June every year to strengthen action and cooperation in achieving a world free of drug abuse. The aim of this year's campaign is to raise awareness about the importance of treating people who use drugs with respect and empathy, providing evidence-based voluntary services for all, offering alternatives to punishment, prioritizing prevention, and leading with compassion. The campaign also aims to combat stigma and discrimination against people who use drugs by promoting language and attitudes that are respectful and non-judgmental. I know some of you who are not members of the International Society of Substance Use Professionals, known as ISSUP, may want to ask, what is ISSUP all about? Well, we are a membership organization that connects, unites, and provides knowledge to the global substance use prevention, treatment, and recovery support workforce. Our vision is to have a connected, trained, knowledgeable, and effective international network of substance use prevention, treatment, and recovery professionals undertaking and promoting high quality, evidence-based, and ethical substance use prevention, treatment, and recovery support. Our mission is to establish substance use prevention, treatment, and recovery support as a unique and multidisciplinary field through professionalization and development of its network of substance use prevention, treatment and recovery support professionals. In addition, ISSUP Bahamas has been established to promote the mission and mission of ISSUP within the Commonwealth of the Bahamas and internationally in collaboration with global ISSUP and other national chapters. ISSUP Bahamas represents the professional interests of substance use professionals, educators, and other addiction-focused healthcare professionals in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. As an essential part of the healthcare continuum, ISSUP Bahamas members and its affiliates will work to create healthier individuals, families, communities through prevention, intervention, quality treatment, and recovery support. The process will be guided by the ethical ideals of the National Association of Alcohol and Drug Abuse Counselors, NADAC, the International Center for Certification and Education, ICE, and the International Society of Substance Use Professionals. As we forge forward during this transitional stage, we sincerely desire that our government here in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas ratifies this association as an official body to assist in reducing, producing, and using illicit drugs. Sandler's Rehabilitation, known as SRC, is our host organization for the International Society of Substance Use Professional Prevention Treatment Professionals in the Bahamas, hence ISSUP Bahamas chapter. And our formal launch, ladies and gentlemen, was held on February 2nd, 2023 at the University of the Bahamas in beautiful Nassau, Bahamas. Now, as we segue into our program, we have a cadre of experienced, knowledgeable professionals who are also executives of ISSUP Bahamas who will be presenting today on such topics as community counseling against stigma and discrimination. Together we can stop stigma and discrimination in STUDS treatment facilities. Together each accomplish much. The risk and safety impacts of stigma and discrimination on patients. Negative impact of stigma and discrimination on patients and family with gambling and substance use disorder. Stop stigma and discrimination. Strengthen prevention through education. And finally, eliminating stigma and discrimination in the vulnerable population. Yes, folks, we have a lot of information provided here this evening. So we'll be here until 8:30. The first segment will be our prepared speakers who will be presenting on their various topic. I, your moderator, will be introducing each of them. They will present, and then we will have you go into the breakout rooms where we can elaborate more on the topic. Now, once I can get a consensus, once we finish, if we don't have more than, I would say more than 15, then we probably will just have it in the general plenary on the subject matter. But we had more than 101, we had actually more than 100 persons who have registered. And I know earlier today, persons throughout the Bahamas and the Caribbean were attempting to register, but they got a notice saying, you're all sold out. But nevertheless, we are streaming live via our Facebook page on ISSUP Bahamas. And I will kindly ask each and every one of you to go to the Facebook and share the video via Facebook. And maybe your friends, your family who might have some form of substance use or mental health issue, they can join in on the conversation and get the necessary information to make an informed decision. That being said, let me just introduce our very first speaker. But before I introduce our very first speaker, let me just do some housekeeping right now. If there are any questions, please place in the chat your questions. and we will make note of it and have them answered. Or you can wait till we go into the breakout rooms to ask your questions. And I will kindly ask of you to keep your mic muted while the speaker is making his or her presentation. And after each and every one already completed their presentation, and as I stated before, if there are not more than 15 on the Zoom call, because I'm seeing here on Facebook, we have a number of persons already signed in, then we will go to the general plenary. But if we have more than 15, we will go to our breakout room. Without further delay, let's move right along. Our first speaker is Shaniqua Smith, who is our chaplain. Miss Shaniqua Smith was born in Nassau, Bahamas. Before attending the College of the Bahamas, she completed her secondary level education at NGM Major High School, Deadman's Key, Long Island. She obtained 2 associate degrees, an Associate of Arts in Biology and Chemistry, an Associate of Science in Nursing. She is a licensed registered nurse by the Nursing Council of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. And she is Commonwealth of the Bahamas and is employed by the Public Hospital Authority. Ms. Smith is currently deployed at the Community Counseling and Assessment Center, where she functions as a registered nurse and a substance addiction specialist. Ms. Smith received a Bachelor's of Science degree in psychology from the University of Phoenix and a Master's of Science degree in forensic psychology from Walden University. Ms. Smith is an international certified addiction professional, ICAP 2, and a global trainer, a global master trainer. She has facilitated and participated in substance addiction training internationally in the USA, Thailand, Mexico, Brazil, and Europe. And let me put this, she just came back from South America today. So she has a wealth of knowledge. And nationally, the Bahamas. Ms. Smith cites one of her favorite scriptures passages as Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. Trust in the Lord with all thine heart, and lean not unto thine own understanding. In all thy ways acknowledge him, and he will direct thy paths. Ms. Smith is the author of a book, Knowing the True and Living God Intimately. So let's see your virtual hands as you put those together and welcome our first speaker, Ms. Shaniqua Smith.
Thank you, Mr. President. So this evening, my presentation will be on community counseling against stigma and discrimination. Please excuse my voice because I am battling a flu bug and I'm definitely tuned to women, okay? So with this presentation, we're gonna look at our objectives, and our objectives are, number 1, to define stigma, to define discrimination, understand the effects of stigma and discrimination, as well as some of the do's and don'ts concerning stigma. Next slide, please. Thank you, sir. So what is stigma? Stigma is negative characteristics used to identify people. It can be known as a mark of shame, disgrace, or discredit. It can result in rejection and contempt towards individuals who possess the attributes by those who do not possess the attributes. Stigma can result in a superior-inferior complex, meaning where subordination of a discredited group by those who are considered superior or elite. Next slide. There are 5 stages or steps to stigma. The first step to stigma is labeling. This is when people are identified because of their differences. The second step to stigma is called stereotyping. And here, people are stereotyped because of the linkage with undesirable characteristics. And this linkage now results in what is called separation. And this separation occurs between those who have the label tied and those who do not. Once the separation has been taken place, now it results in what is called a loss of subject condition. And this is particularly to those who have the label tied. And finally, unequal exercise of power. And once the unequal exercise of power is present, it fuels discrimination, rejection, exclusion of those who are stigmatized against and those who are not. Stigmatization is very complex because not only does it involve interpersonal matters, it also involves historical and cultural values that reinforces social ideologies and imagery. So now, what is discrimination? Discrimination is the unjust or prejudicial treatment of different categories of people, especially on the ground of age, sex, disability, and in this case, drug use. Discrimination is the behavior that results from the attitude and beliefs of stigma. And discrimination can occur on the micro level. Micro level basically mean towards self, where you self-discriminate. It can occur on the meso level. That's between family and friends, when family and friends now discriminate against you. Or it can occur on the macro level, where now you have the community and healthcare professionals being discriminated, having discrimination against you. So what are some of the factors that are contributing to stigma? These factors can include gender, age and ethnicity, education, employment, socioeconomic status, health situations, be it mental or physical, geographical location, political affiliation. So with that being said, what are some of the effects of stigma? How does stigma affect an individual? And stigma has a multiplicity of effects. The first one is social rejection. People who use drugs are linked with poverty, lack of employment, irresponsibility, aggression, traffic accidents, and criminality. Stigma also leads to the hindrance of access of different social benefits, and for example, healthcare treatment. Another effect of stigma is discrimination, and discrimination due to education, healthcare, and decent employment. Stigma also impacts interpersonal relationships, and this can result in the loss of identity, hopelessness, and low self-esteem. As the effects of stigma continue, stigma puts people at a socially disadvantaged level from others. For example, subordination of a discredited group with respect to another that considers themselves superior. Stigma can lead to the infringement of fundamental rights by the judicial system. For example, it can result in arbitrary arrest, physical abuse, sexual abuse, and extortion, particularly with women who use drugs. And finally, stigma can cause a direct implication regarding health investments. And in this, we see that there's low budget. Their treatment care provided offers cessation based on punishment and humility treatment. And then there's the violation of universal rights of health and not to be subjected to cruel and degrading treatment. So what are some of the facts about stigma? The Inter-American Drug Abuse Control Commission of the Organization of America states that a CCAT of OAS shared that limited access to decent employment makes a person more vulnerable to problem pattern of substance use, while stigma and exclusion reinforces psychological process. For example, low self-esteem. It does not matter how qualified a person is. Once labeled as a consumer, a drug user, or has a criminal history, he is at the disadvantage to others. And this can be seen with the decreased job opportunity as well as decreased social inclusions. So what are some of the do's that should be done to basically eliminate stigma? Number one, be friendly. Be respectful of others. Treat others with a positive attitude. Respect cultural differences. Accept persons for who and where they are. Use a non-judgmental approach. Be sensitive. Be aware of personal biases. Be aware of nonverbal communications. For example, facial expressions, eye contact, gestures, even your posture. Treat others the way you want to be treated. And finally, listen to what they have to say. And what are some of the do nots that we should implement? Do not judge. Do not use stigmatizing language. Do not operate from a biased point of view. And do not use discriminating behavior. So we want to stop stigma today. And in summary, we recognize that stigma refers to attitudes and beliefs. Discrimination is the behavior that results from those attitudes and beliefs. We see that stigma can cross cultural boundaries. Stigma and discrimination leads to victimization. And people who use drugs are stigmatized against. And so again, I would like to add that we should stop stigma today. Do your part. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Shaniqua Smith, for that informative, educational information about stigma and how we can stop stigma. Ladies and gentlemen, let's move right along to our second speaker. Our second speaker is Ms. Pamela B. Smith. She's Secretary of the International Society of Substance Use Bahamas National Chapter. Ms. Smith is a licensed registered nurse of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas for more than 23 years. She's employed with the Public Hospital Authority as a nursing officer 2 and manager of the detoxification unit at our basically the country's only, and let me say, only mental health facility. She holds an Associate of Science degree in nursing. She's an international certified addiction professional, ICAP 1. She is a moral recognition therapy facilitator, a leadership for change facilitator with the International Council of Nursing, ICN, and the Nurses Association of Commonwealth of the Bahamas. 13 years, over 23 years in nursing has been dedicated to the working with clients assessed as having SUDs. Her work continues with the Substance Abuse Team Strategic Planning Committee, serve as a lead trainer for smoking cessation and conducting staff, clients, and relatives teaching in SUD and relapse prevention. Ms. Smith's goal is to utilize her knowledge, skills, talents, and attitude to changing lives and rebuilding families and communities through her contributions in substance use prevention and treatment. My daily prayer comes from Psalms 19, verses 14. Let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, my rock and my redeemer. Ladies and gentlemen, put your virtual hands together and let us welcome Sister Pamela B. Smith.
Thank you very much. Just pulling up my presentation. Moment, please.
As Ms. Smith prepares to bring our presentation up, for those of you who are on this call from around the world, let me just let you know that the Bahamas is an island nation. I don't want to say that word because if I say that word, I'm going to jack that word right up. So I decided not to try to pronounce that word. But the Bahamas is made up of 700 islands and keys. And the capital of the Bahamas is Nassau, which is located on the island of New Providence. Currently, I am located in the second city, which is Freeport, Grand Bahama. Our population is approximately 400,000. It's not quite 400,000, but it's nearing 400,000. And we have a diverse population, with majority of our population being Black. About 12 to 15% of that population is Caucasian. Are we ready to go, Ms. Pamela?
I can you see the screen?
No, we cannot see your screen, ma'am. So as we wait for Pamela.
Can you?
Hold on, let me make sure. You know, sometimes technology does it to us. Let me pull Shaniqua on off, make sure. Cancel, okay. I almost cut off this meeting just now. Okay, you tried, Pamela?
Okay, let me try again. It's not opening. I can see it, but apparently you're not able to.
You have to share it. You open it now. You have to share it.
I have.
No, you haven't shared it. Go to the bottom and share it. Do I have your slideshow?
Slideshow.
Okay, what we will do for the sake of time, please email me your slideshow. And
yes,
what we will do is we will go on to the next speaker. Let me make sure I have the next speaker lined up for us as we segue right into okay, can the other speaker, the next speaker should be Eloise Roll. Are you able to share your screen, Ms. Roll, while I introduce you? Eloise Roll, are you there?
Yes, I'm having some internet connections. I'll be up in about a minute.
Okay, you have internet connection. Pamela can't get her stuff. Madam Dean, I know you're the go-to lady. I know you're good like that. Are you able
Right.
to pull up your screen? Are you able to start your presentation, Ms. Dean? I can introduce you. Let me know.
I should be able to. I'll
Share it with me for me, please. Okay, I will introduce you now as you share that screen. Oh, I see Eloise has her. Eloise, are you have an internet? Are you able to present? That's Eloise or Pamela up there. I mean,
this here? This is me, negative impact?
Or the risk, I see the risk and safety. Keep on showing up on my screen.
Oh, okay.
Who's that? The risk and
Hi, that's it. That's Eloise. I'm sorry, the internet is dipping.
right,
So
that's what I'm saying.
I'm good now.
It's good?
Yes.
Okay, because we could have gone to the next one and come back to you. Okay, so we have our next presenter is Eloise Roll. Eloise Roll is presenting on the risk and safety impact of stigma and discrimination on patients. And she is a registered nurse, and she is the manager oversight of safety at the Public Hospital Authority in the Bahamas. Ms. Eloise Roll, you can present.
Hi, good evening. So my short discussion will be on the risk and safety impact of stigma and discriminations on patients and persons in our community. Some people are more likely to use drugs than others due to their surroundings, their friends, or their emotional state. Some are more prone to develop a drug addiction due to their family history or another health issue at bay. On the other hand, some individuals are inherently less likely to use drugs due to the neighborhood they grew up in or their constant engagement at school, work, or their community involvement. The risk and protective/safety factors. Assessing the risk and protective factors that contribute to substance use disorders helps practitioners select appropriate interventions. Many factors influence a person's chance of developing a mental and/or substance use disorder. Effective prevention focuses on reducing those risk factors and strengthening protective factors that are most closely related to the problem being addressed at that time. Applying the Strategic Prevention Framework, which is SPF, helps prevention professionals identify factors having the greatest impact on their target population or patients. Risk factors are characteristics at the biological, psychological, family, community, or cultural level that precede and are associated with a higher likelihood of negative outcomes. And then we look at protective or safety factors. These are characteristics associated with a lower likelihood of negative outcomes or that reduce the risk factors' impact on the patient or our population. Protective factors may be seen as a positive countering events. Some risk and protective/safety factors are fixed. They don't change over time. Other risk and protective factors are considered variable and can change over time. Variable factors include income level, peer group, adverse childhood experience, employment status, and of course, divorce. Individual level risk factors may include a person's generic predisposition to addiction or exposure, to alcohol prenatally. My apologies, didn't realize my camera was off. Individual level protective factors may include positive self-image, self-control, or social competence. And some of the key factors are prevention. Professionals should consider these key factors of risk and protective factors when designing and evaluating prevention interventions. Then prioritize the risk and protective factors that most impact their patients. All people have biological and psychological characteristics that make them vulnerable to or resilient in the face of potential behavioral health issues, because people have relationships within their communities and the society at large. Each person's biological and psychological characteristics exist in multiple contexts. A variety of risk and protective factors operate with each of these contexts. These factors also influence one another. Targeting only one context when addressing a person's or your patient's risk or protective factors is unlikely to be successful, because people don't exist in isolation, which we have proven to be so true. And examples are in relationships. Risk factors include parents or spouses who use drugs and alcohol and who suffer from mental illness, child abuse, maltreatment, and inadequate supervision in context. Parental involvement is an example of a protective factor in children. In communities, risk factors include neighborhood poverty and violence. Hence, protective factors can include the availability of faith-based resources and after-school care. And loss of income is for adults is also under communities. And when they can't access those resources in order to generate income to adequately take care of their family and loved ones. In society, risk factors can include norms and laws favorable to substance use, as well as racism and lack of economic opportunity. Protective factors in these contents will include hate crime laws or policies limiting the availability of number one drug use in many parts of the world, alcohol. Risk and protective factors are correlated and cumulative. Risk factors tend to be positively correlated with one another and negatively correlated to protective or safety factors. In other words, people with some risk factors have a greater chance of experiencing even more risk factors, and they are less likely to have protective or safety factors. Risk and safety factors also tend to have a cumulative effect on the development or reduced development of behavioral health issues. Most young people with multiple risk factors have a greater likelihood of developing a condition that impacts their physical or mental health. Young people with multiple protective factors are at a reduced risk. The correlation underscores the importance of early interventions that target multiple, not single factors. Individual factors can be associated with multiple outcomes. Through preventative interventions are often designed to produce a single outcome. Both risk and protective factors can be associated with multiple outcomes. For example, negative life events are associated with substance use, as well as anxiety, depression, and other behavioral issues. Prevention efforts targeting a set of risk or protective safety factors have the potential to produce positive effects in multiple areas at the same time. Risk and safety factors are influential over time. Risk and protective factors can have influence throughout a person's entire lifespan. For example, risk factors such as poverty and family dysfunction can contribute to the development of mental and/or substance use disorders later on in life. Risk and protective factors within one particular context, such as the family, may also influence or be influenced by factors in other contexts. Effective parenting has been shown to mediate the effects of multiple risk factors, including poverty, divorce, parental bereavement, and parental mental illness. The more we understand how risk and protective safety factors interact, the better prepared we will be to develop appropriate intervention. Not all people or populations are at the same risk of developing behavioral health problems. Prevention interventions are most effective when they are matched to their target population's level of risk. Prevention interventions fall into three broad categories. One, universal preventative interventions. They take the broadest approach and design to reach entire groups of population. Universal prevention interventions may target schools, whole communities, or workplaces as a whole. Secondly, selective interventions target biological, psychological, or social risk factors that are more prominent among high-risk groups than among the wider population. Examples include prevention education for immigrant families with young children or peer support groups for adults with a family history of substance use disorders. Thirdly, indicated preventative intervention. These target individuals who show signs of being at risk for substance use disorders. These types of interventions include referral to support services for young adults and violate drug policies or screening and consultation for families of older adults admitted to hospital and outpatient facilities with potential alcohol-related injuries. And that includes my short presentation. And we have more information that will go on when we do our breakout sessions in our rooms. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Eloise Roll. You can bring down your share screen, please, so that I can share. So, ladies and gentlemen, that was Nurse Eloise Roll, our Assistant Treasurer of the Bahamas National Chapter of ISSUP. I almost stated, folks, our original name, Bahamas Association of Addiction Professionals, but it is International Society of Substance Use Professionals, ISSUP, Bahamas National Chapter. And our next speaker, who I already introduced prior to Ms. Roll, and she's none other, and she's the Lone Ranger working on our treatment center at SRC. So put your virtual hands together, ladies and gentlemen, and just welcome her as we share her slides as she presents this evening.
Thank you so much, Mr. President. I thank the two speakers who came before me, who so ably talk about stigma and discrimination. My task is simple. I'm here to present together we can stop stigma and discrimination in SUD treatment facilities.
I don't
together,
know.
each achieve much, which is taken from our team approach.
Sorry, Pam. Eloise, can you unmute your mic, please? Go ahead, Pamela.
Thank you. Next slide, please. As was stated before, I work in an inpatient treatment center That is a detoxification unit. And just to give a little history about it and tell you what we offer to our clients and what to expect as we combat stigma in our institutions. The detox unit was established in 1992 as a project of the community drive Hands Across the Bahamas. It was spearheaded by the Rotary Club of the Bahamas in response to the need for an introductory phase to the inpatient intensive drug rehabilitation program offered at this mental health facility. Our inpatient treatment is a co-ed facility that assists clients that present with alcohol, marijuana, prescription, and street drug disorders, and often a combination of these drug use. In addition, we also have persons presenting with gambling disorder. And detox is an acute phase of treatment and is provided by a multidisciplinary team. Our referrals that come into detox comes from our Community Counseling and Assessment Center, that is commonly known as the CCAC, Princess Margaret Hospital at PMH, magistrate court referrals. Okay, and that is so needed as we talk about discrimination, where the goal should always be on treatment and not punishment. Bahamas Department of Corrections, in our correctional facilities, sometimes the sentence is a combination where they would serve their sentence at the Department of Corrections, and then at the end of their time in our correctional facilities, they are also asked to complete a substance abuse program before they are released back into the communities. Referrals also come from our Family Island consultants, and also want to put in here our NGOs, our other non-governmental organizations who also have facilities that cater to and assist with substance treatment and prevention. However, when clients who are enrolled in their program, they may get to a state where they're not able to treat them adequately, they make referrals onto Sanders Rehabilitation Center, where they can be treated at our detoxification units. People first. Our goal at Sanders Rehabilitation Centers to ensure that all clients feel welcome and cared for in our treatment facilities. We can start by refraining from using disparaging or judgmental terms to refer to people diagnosed with a substance use disorder. Our words do hurt and can make the difference between someone seeking help or deciding not to. Continue. We can also borrow from John Hopkins' Words Matter pledge. And this pledge comes where we encourage our staff to understand that the language we use relating to addiction is important, that we believe that words matter and that using the right language helps decrease stigma. I will choose language that leads to more effective treatment and compassionate, supportive families and communities for those with substance use disorder. Now, John Hopkins penned a pledge, and it says that I pledge to treat all people with a substance use disorder with dignity and respect. I will talk about substance use disorder as a chronic illness and not as a moral failing, which is the belief of some of our citizens. You want to be a leader in reducing stigma and promoting recovery from this disease. This language, this type of things that we would encourage in our health facilities. Next page. We have a team approach, and I spoke about our therapeutic team. It involves our physician, the psychiatrist, our psychologist, our nurse, trained in addiction and psychiatric nurse, our recreational therapist, our occupational therapist, because we want to ensure that our clients are engaged and continue to work on behavior change. Our psychologist, our social worker, our dietitian, and of course, our support staff, our male and female patient care assistants. Excellent team. What we also want to do as a treatment facility, we need to give options. As all of us learn differently, we respond to different types of treatments. We want to give our clients options. For example, we can utilize partial hospitalization, or we can reintroduce our day program that has been temporarily suspended due to the COVID outbreak. However, as we relax some of our mandates, we are looking forward to recommencing our day program, which will also capture a lot of our clients who require additional care. We can also allow persons who want to continue with their jobs, okay? They can come in the day or in the evening, depending on how it is that they work, okay? Engage, get the assistance that they need, and then continue with their lives, okay? Some persons respond better to treatment like that, so we always want to offer them options. In addition to that, our day program, returning to the family in the evening, or persons who want to work and continue to get the help that they need. They may require 2 to 3 sessions during the day or to sit with their counselor. The question, who all are a part of this team? Our government. We need legislation to focus on treatment, not punishment. And also it can build in our laws where we can come to understand and treat our people with dignity and respect. It starts with our laws. We need our treatment facilities, all of them. We need our families. We need our communities. We need the media. We need you. We are all a part of this team. We need each and every one of us. Next page, please. In summary, we can all share facts and dispel myths. When we talk about our language, we can utilize more accepting language. For example, instead of using stigmatizing words such as drug abuser, we refer to the individual as someone who has a substance use disorder. Instead of saying abuser, addict, drunk, junkie, we want to say persons with a substance use disorder, which is the appropriate way to refer to our clients. Instead of using problem, we can use unhealthy, or in some cases, heavy use. Refrain from words such as clean or dirty. Instead, we can say that the individual is in recovery. In addition to that, we can also use negative or positive results instead of saying, a dirty toxicology or clean toxicology. Now, again, we can all share facts and dispel myths. And we know our young people, wow, some of the things that they believe, we have got to do a lot of work in dispelling those myths. We want to listen to the people we serve and pay attention to their input. Each client that comes to our facility, they do an exit survey. And on that survey, they have excellent ideas as to how we can cater to them, okay, that will better assist them as they recover and live a life of recovery. And as written on our exit survey, as I said, follow their advice. We want to be fully present. We're all in this technological age where we're all on a tablet or a cell phone or some other thing. It's so amazing how we try to multitask, every day, all day. Just on a, anything that we do, we try to maximize. So we say what it is that we're doing by doing numerous things. However, that is really discriminatory to our clients. When we're dealing with our clients, we need to be fully present, engaging them in what it is, the individualized session, whatever it is that we're doing with them. We must remember Reducing stigma and discrimination is a fundamental step in changing lives, changing our families, and most of all, building our communities. In addition, we can speak out. We can keep hope alive. We can treat people with dignity and respect. We can think about the individual, not the behavior. Okay, refrain from using discriminatory language, and most of all, we can use self to, and a common saying, but for the grace of God, there goes I. It could be you, it could be me. How would we want to be treated? We would want to be treated with dignity and respect. So as we continue to work in our healthcare facility, we have an obligation to serve the people to the best of our abilities. Thank you.
Thank you very much, our most able Secretary of ISSUP Bahamas National Chapter. What a very informative presentation. It gave me and no doubt our viewers around the globe a better insight at what happens at our premier psychiatric and drug treatment facility here in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. Thank you very much for that presentation.
Thank you.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, our next presenter coming before us is a well-rounded lady. And when I say well-rounded, I am not talking about physically. She's well-rounded, knowledgeably. You know, I always thought I was the one who always in school. But since I met this lady, 16, almost, how much years? Since 2014 or before, she's been in school. And I think she's gonna go to school until, you know, the rooster comes home, but she's always equipping herself. Without further delay, let me introduce our next speaker. Ms. Paulette Dean is a 40-year registered and trained psychiatric nurse practicing in Nassau, Bahamas. 40 years, but she just looked like she turned 40, but nevertheless. She is an internationally certified addiction professional with the Colombo Plan ICE. She has many years of experience treating patients with various medical, surgical, and psychiatric disorders, including gambling addiction. Additionally, Mrs. Dean is a certified moral recognition therapy MRT facilitator. Furthermore, she possesses a Bachelor's of Science in Nursing from the University of the Bahamas. Mrs. Dean is a trained adult educator in nursing from the University of the Bahamas. She's also a trained adult educator in program planner, skill discharge planning consultant, and experienced case management professional. As a proponent for gambling addiction awareness, treatment, and recovery, Mrs. Dean is providing quality, compassionate care and clinical expertise to address clients with this addiction. She obtained her gambling addiction specialist training in 2019 with the University of Minnesota program Studies in Gambling Addiction, counseling the disordered gambler. She aspires to assist as many persons as possible with this hidden but debilitating disorder. Let us welcome to the platform none other than our Vice President, and I always like to say our Senior Vice President of the Bahamas National Chapter, who will speak to us on the topic, negative impact of stigma and discrimination on patients and family with gambling and substance use disorder. Let us put our virtual hands together and welcome Mrs. Paulette Dean.
Thank you. Can you see the screen?
Yes, we can see the screen. You want to put it on slideshow now?
Yes. I'm doing that.
Yeah, look like we finished your slideshow.
Oh, wow.
Okay. Oh, you start
Apologies. Let's
from
get
the
up.
beginning. While we wait on Ms. Dean to have a slideshow up and ready, just want you to know that we are pleased that, especially for you guys who are from the other side of the globe, in here with us.
Wow. I was working overtime now.
Okay. You have to start it from the beginning.
Yeah, I'm trying to do it. I don't know what's going on. This thing is in my way. Apologies. I don't know what's happening here. Okay.
What we will do, we will have, while you get that prepared, you want to try it one more time?
Yes, I'm doing it right now. Okay. Why is this? Oh gosh. Issued my slideshow. What's happening here? I don't know what's happening here.
Before you click slideshow, can you click on the first slide with your cursor? Click on the first slide with your cursor. Right. Now go to slideshow. Right. Go to slideshow now. It should start from the beginning now.
Okay.
Awesome.
All right. Wow. Thank you so much. Yes, good evening once again. It's certainly a pleasure to be here to talk about the negative impact of stigma on gambling and substance use disorder. Substance use disorders and problem gambling or disorder are amongst the most stigmatized health-related conditions affecting persons in communities globally. And despite public education efforts and stigma reduction efforts, this population are still viewed in a negative manner. According to population studies of major industrialized nations, greater social distance is desired from persons who use substances and gambling than persons with other mental health disorders, such as schizophrenia, and of course, others like bipolar disorder, depression, okay? The evidence suggests that fears of unpredictability, irrational behavior, and dangerous dangerousness are major factors in the stigma that these persons experience. Sometimes I go outside and I really feel hated. I thought it must be how I dress or the expression on my face or something. You just constantly feel like you've got a big neon sign on your head saying loser, you know, contemptible loser. So when someone actually in a shop or something, they'll actually smile at you or act like you're a normal being, human being. It's really restorative. It cheers me up for days. That's a voice of a person with a stigma and addiction. At the end of the day, you've got to be happy with yourself. And I am not happy with myself. I don't look in the mirror and say I love myself. I don't even like myself. I self-loathe myself. I hate myself. I hate what I've done to myself and done to others by doing it to myself. These are some of the sad, sad voices of persons who have been stigmatized with an addiction. Substance abuse and gambling disorders are self-medicating means of coping with many mental and social issues. So then what is mental health? Mental health, as defined by the World Health Organization, is a state of well-being in which every individual that realizes his or her own potential, can cope with the normal stresses of life, can work productively and fruitfully, and is able to make a contribution to her or his community. Mental illness, on the other hand, are health conditions involving changes in the way you feel, think, or behave, or it can be the combination of these. Mental illness can be associated with distress or problems functioning in social work or family activities, and this is by the American Psychiatric Association. Gambling addiction and gambling and social or substance use disorders are all mental illnesses. So what is an addiction? An addiction is defined as a chronic relapsing disorder characterized by compulsive drug seeking or even behavior, and it's continued despite harmful consequences and long-lasting changes in the brain. It is considered both a complex brain disorder and a mental illness. It's not making bad decisions, nor it is a sign of weaknesses. There are two types of addictions, mainly substance addictions and non-substance addictions, which are behavioral addictions such as gambling disorder, sex, shopping, video games, being a workaholic, and eating disorders. Substance use disorder, this is a mental health condition in which a person has a problematic pattern of substance use that causes distress and or impairs their life. Substance use disorders exist on a spectrum and may be mild, moderate, or severe. It's typically involved in overpowering desire to use the substance or the behavior, increased tolerance to the substance or withdrawals symptoms when you stop taking the drug. A person can have more than one substance use disorder at a time, such as alcohol use disorder and cocaine use disorder. According to George Washington, gambling addiction is described as, it is the child of avarice, which is greed, the brother of inequity, and father of mischief. It has been the ruin of many worthy families, the loss of many a man's honor, and the cause of suicide. This is so sad and so true. So, gambling disorder is defined in the 5th edition of Diagnostic and Statistical Manual as a persistent and recurrent pattern of gambling that causes functional problems or distress for the affected individual. Gambling disorder is classified as an addictive disorder, along with alcohol and other substance use disorder. It is chronic and relapsing, and it's definitely a brain disorder. It is the uncontrollable urge to keep gambling despite the toll it takes on your life. Gambling means that you are willing to risk something you value in the hope of getting something of even greater value. So that just does not mean money. It stimulates the brain's reward system, much like drugs or alcohol can, leading to an addiction. Although many use it as a means of entertainment, gambling addiction is a serious condition that can destroy lives and lead to many health challenges. Treating gambling disorder can be challenging, but many people who struggle, they have found help with professional assistance. So then what are the predisposing factors for gambling disorder? They have the biological reasons, which can be genetic in nature, psychological, which is the ability or the need to cope, and of course, social factors is having early exposure to gambling or even peer pressure. So stigma is already defined earlier, okay? But just to reiterate, stigma is the process whereby an individual or group of persons are held in contempt or viewed in a negative way because of their behavior or characteristic they possess. These characteristics or behaviors are considered outside what is generally considered normal. People who are stigmatized are often generalized and stereotyped, socially excluded or unequally treated and blamed for the experienced disadvantage. And those people that we are certainly, that we are aware of that actually are stigmatized on a great level are persons with gambling addictions and persons who have substance use disorders. So the origin is largely due to fear, and of course also to inaccurate or misleading media representation of mental illness. And that contributes to both the fear and of course to the misunderstanding. Our review of studies on stigma shows that while the public may accept the medical or genetic nature of a mental disorder and the need for treatment, many people still have a very negative view of those people with mental illness. You know, stigma involves negative evaluations and attitudes about a condition, leading to status loss and discrimination of affected individuals. An influential model of stigma proposes that stigma occurs through a process of identifying and labeling differences among persons, assigning negative stereotypes to labeled persons, categorizing labeled persons as distinctly separate from those considered normal, and devaluing and discriminating against labeled persons. So a research study was conducted in 2015. The topic was stigma of problem gambling causes, characteristics, and consequences. It revealed how the public perceived the dimensions of problem gambling and stigmatized that condition through a process of labeling, stereotyping, separating emotional reactions and status loss and discrimination. The results indicate that problem gambling is considered by the public to be an addiction, largely due to reactions to stressful life circumstances. The stereotypes attached to problem gamblers were that they are impulsive, irresponsible, greedy, irrational, antisocial, untrustworthy, unproductive, and foolish, and that the public generally assigns blame for the problem to the individual affected. The public also generally decides some social distancing from people with gambling addiction. They feel pity, but also anger and apprehension towards them, but recognizes they are demeaned and discriminated against in numerous ways. So there are three main types of stigma. There's public stigma, and that is the negative attitudes and judgments about a condition that are endorsed by the public. Perceived stigma is the person with addiction belief about how a person view them, and self-stigma is internalized negative stereotypes of the evaluation and shame by individuals stigmatized. And of course, structural stigma are policies, procedures, or rules within an organization that limits the rights or opportunities for a stigmatized group. The predictors of stigmas that are attributed to whatever the cause may be, the degree of the dangerousness, and whether there's control over the condition or not. Persons with gambling addictions are seen to have bad character and stressful life circumstances, and it's less likely than schizophrenia or other mental disorders to be due to genetics and chemical imbalance. They feel that persons with a gambling addiction cause it on themselves. So they view gambling addiction and of course substance use very negatively. Gambling disorder elicits similar levels of stigma as alcohol and other substance use disorder. Similarly, in the stigmatization of addictions, whether behavioral or substance related. Substance use disorders are stigmatized more than other psychiatric disorders, viewed as more to the blame than their conditions and more dangerous and unpredictable. So let's look at some of the negative impact of stigma. Some of these were already mentioned earlier. As you know, persons with gambling addiction, they feel alone, isolated, not respected, belittled, and they're already feeling bad about themselves and ashamed of the way they would have treated themselves and some of the poor decisions that they would have made. Okay, so some of these negative impact effects come from that feeling, that view that they have of themselves. Feeling of shame, hopelessness, and isolation, reluctance to ask for help or even to get treatment. Only 10% of persons with a gambling addiction seek help. The others refuse to come for help. Lack of understanding by family members or friends or others. There's fewer opportunities for social interactions. Persons prefer not to be with those people, and people with addiction prefer not to be with other persons because of the way they feel. Pardon me. Bullying, physical violence, and harassment also is a problem. Self-doubt and the belief that you will never ever overcome your illness. You end up in criminal justice system. Unemployment is a big problem. No family or significant other support. A lot of people
iPhone, WA business
addiction. I guess I just say my time is up, if I'm not mistaken. Anyway, that they are unable to perform the tasks of daily living. Okay, so I just want to give some tips on how to fight stigma. I think it's important, okay? So allow me to finish, Mr. Troy Clark. Challenging stigma. Everyone, yes, you and me have a role to play in creating a mentally healthy community, one that is inclusive, rejects discrimination, and supports recovery. Ways to help include learning the facts about mental illness and sharing them with your family, friends, work colleagues, and classmates. Get to know people with personal experience of mental disorders so you can learn to see them for the person they really are rather than their illness. Not judging or labeling or discriminating when you meet people with mental illness. Treat all people with respect. Avoid using language that puts the illness first and the person second. Say, a person with bipolar disorder rather than that person is bipolar. Say something when you hear people around you making stereotypical or inaccurate comments about mental illness. Advocate for the patients. Also share your own experience of mental illness. This will help dispel myths and encourage others to do the same. Remember, mental illness is not something to be ashamed of, and it needs not to be hidden. It is a mental disorder. So together, let us just join the battle, end the stigma against gambling addiction and substance use disorder, okay? Remember, there is no health without mental health. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much. Ladies and gentlemen, I told you she is full. She's pregnant with a lot of information. Now, in a general plenary, she will be able, we're going to ask some more questions actually about the gambling, because that's a very interesting subject matter and information that she shared. And I would really like for us to dissect that and correlate the usage of substance use and gambling disorder. So please don't go nowhere. Our senior vice president of ISSUP Bahamas chapter, because you have some more information. I know you are just ready to give birth with more information. So just stand by as we go to the next speaker. Thank you very, very much, Madam Mrs. Dane, for that presentation. And as you get prepared to stop sharing on your screen so we can share for our next speaker, make sure I have the other speaker up and running. Okay, let me take down Paulette and bring up our next speaker. Okay, good. Our next speaker, ladies and gentlemen, she is our training, she's the coordinator for our chapter. She's treasurer and liaison coordinator, I must say. Ms. Smith is a psychiatric nurse. Sorry, you know this technology. Let me move, unpin Paulette, and good. Awesome. I think I lost that information. Okay, good. I haven't lost it. Good. Ms. Smith is a psychiatric and renal trained nurse who holds an advanced certificate in nursing education with honors and a Master's of Science in Nursing Education distinction from UWI, and a certificate in healthcare management from Nova Southeastern University. Her present post is Senior Manager Training and Development at Sandlands Rehabilitation Center, SRC, and she ensures that training is provided for all staff. An international certified addiction professional and a gambling addiction specialist responsible for coordinating addictions training, amongst others, as well as facilitating and lecturing in various post-basic training programs, such as post-basic psychiatric mental health nursing diploma program for registered nurses, amongst other professional and self-development programs. Ms. Smith is a member of the SRC public education team and enjoys teaching. She has 42 years in the healthcare service. She is a mother of a son, a daughter, an adopted little son, and a grandmother of 2. Ms. Smith attends the Church of God of Prophecy, and her philosophy is strive for excellence always. As we put our hands together, let us welcome our next speaker, Ms. Brenda Smith.
Good evening, and thank you all. I know my presentation will be short because we have persons already covered some of it. And so I will move. My topic is stigma and discrimination, trend prevention through education. And you know, this is the theme for this year, World Day, which is actually today. My objective is to discuss strategies to stop stigma and discrimination, trend prevention, and substance abuse. Can you see the screen?
Yes, we can.
We already covered what is stigma and what is discrimination, so I'll move on from there. An qualitative study on addiction-related stigma and discriminated, it was conducted in centers in Mexico City and published online December 2016, and it revealed common practice of stigma and discrimination, and they were judging, mockery, inappropriate comments, overprotection, and hostile look, and they were all identified in the participants. The participant interviewed with drug users, family members, and providers. Another study regarding stigma and discrimination related to mental health and substance issues in primary health care in Toronto, Canada, was conducted and published online March 2020. This study, the findings multiple interconnecting forms of stigma and discrimination encountered in the healthcare center. Stigmatizing attitudes and practices among healthcare providers are well documented, and clients of mental health and substance use services have reported stigmatizing treatment from both general practitioners and psychiatrists. It was also claimed that health professionals are the most strategically located yet challenging group for anti-stigma effort. Creating anti-discrimination capacity building program can eliminate these challenges. So, stigma and discrimination. Now, through some education, to stigma and discrimination. So to combat stigma and discrimination by promoting language and attitudes that are respectful and non-judgmental. Empower young people and communities to prevent drug use and addiction. Utilize the various media to help bring about awareness and to disseminate information to aid in stopping stigma and discrimination. Such useful entities are social media, appearance on radio and TV shows, newspaper articles, billboards, and flyers. And you know, a lot of persons are on social media. A lot of things can be done through social media. Speaking engagement at schools, going into schools, workplaces, going into the churches, youth groups, and civil organizations to bring the word about to stop stigma and discrimination. Focus groups with stakeholders to solicit their assistance in promoting activities to stop stigma and discrimination and strengthen prevention. Plan essay competition, especially among the school children, on stopping stigma and discrimination. Once the information for the essay competition, they will also be educating themselves and others about the stigma and discrimination. Implement a stigma and discrimination campaign and rally where various subject matter experts will address. Hold town meetings, community meetings for information sharing and feedback. Engage policymakers and NGOs, non-government organizations in developing and supporting policies in drug prevention and education regarding stigma and discrimination. Design educational and training sessions for healthcare workers that integrate knowledge about stigma, discrimination, and mental health and substance use issues. And then we want to change the language we use. And my colleagues have mentioned that before, the language we use in relation to person with addiction. Some example of words to use and words to avoid. Person with substance use disorder, avoid saying addict. Alcoholic, you say persons with alcohol use disorder. Drug problem or drug habit, substance use disorder. Drug abuse, drug misuse, or harmful use. Drug abuser, avoid saying drug abuser, person with substance use disorder. And misspoke, Dean mentioned about saying whether persons are clean or dirty, or Palm Smith. So we will say abstinent and not actively using, or dirty person actively using. A clean drug environment instead of test, and words to use is testing negative for substance use. Instead of a dirty drug screen, testing positive for substance use. And former reform addict or alcoholic, person in recovery. opioid replacement, methadone maintenance, medication for addiction treatment. So we're going to start using some of this language, which will help stop stigma and discrimination. Another thing that can be added, it'll be persons who are in recovery, bring them on board so that they can speak to various entities about their journey. And once persons can see them speaking, then this will also help to decrease or stop stigma and discrimination. So in conclusion, mental illness and substance use is nothing to be ashamed of. President Bill Clinton stated, but stigma and bias shame us all. Together, we will replace stigma with acceptance, ignorance with understanding, fear with new hope for the future. Be the change you wish to see in the world. And that's by Mahatma Gandhi. We can do it. Let's stop stigma and discrimination and strengthen prevention together. Thank you.
Thank you very much, our most able treasurer for this very brief but informative presentation. She was right to the point. And coming up next, speaking on the final topic will be a young man who was born and raised in the inner city of New Providence. He's an expert in nonprofit management, addiction counseling, personal development training, and motivational speaking. He's a trained UNODC Global Master Trainer. He's also one of, or two of ISSUP facilitators in the INAP Plus program, Introduction of Evidence-Based Prevention field for the Bahamas. He is the founding president and CEO of the National Lead Institute, a 501c tax-exempt organization, president of Caribbean Correctional Training LLC, and vice president of the Bahamas Mental Health Association, and president of the International Society of Substance Use Professional, ISSUP Bahamas. Mr. Clark, all-time mantra is, all men fall, but the great ones get back up. You do not drown by falling into the water. You drown by staying there. I do not decide my future. I decide my habits, and my habits decide my future. And building strong nations, one community at a time. Ladies and gentlemen, without further delay, let us put our hands together and welcome none other than yours truly, President of the Bahamas National Chapter, Troy Clark. Good, awesome. I just had to make that one special because you know he's special bad. Nevertheless, I will be very brief and succinct, just like my colleague Anna Brenda. This evening, for the rest of you who are not speaking, can you put your mic on mute, please? We are recording. There's someone new, please. I got that person. That's okay, good. Someone might missing, come off. Nevertheless, ISSUP Bahamas chapter, World Drug Day theme, People First, Stop Stigma and Discrimination, Strengthen Prevention. And my topic I will be speaking briefly on to you this evening will be eliminating stigma and discrimination in vulnerable populations. Now, my colleagues would have told you about stigma. They give you some brief information on discrimination, and they spoke about it in the various fields, but I will just bring it on home as it relates to the vulnerable population. Vulnerable populations in health behavior research, practices, and policy is generally used to refer to groups that, due to their life circumstances, may require extra consideration, reasonable accommodation, and legitimized protection. And that came from the National Library of Medicine, National Center for Biotechnology Information. In the Bahamas, when we talk about vulnerable population, we talk about the unaccompanied migrant children. And most of those children who are unaccompanied are our brothers and sisters from our southern neighbor, the nation of Haiti on the island of Hispaniola. Also, we have individuals lured for employment. You have a lot of individuals who are told the Bahamas is paradise. Come to the Bahamas and you can meet your dream. And they are lured for many dollars by unscrupulous characters. And a lot of times they are what we call criminal minds or criminal gangsters who lure these individuals from other Caribbean countries, and some of them coming from South American countries, very few coming from African and Asian countries, and they lure them here for employment. These are part of our vulnerable population. You have those who are involved in the commercial sex and exotic dancing. You have those individuals who are irregular migrants, stateless. And when we talk about stateless, and that's before the recent Privy Council ruling on citizenship in the Bahamas, you had a lot of individuals who were born to single or foreign parents, but Bahamian fathers who might be considered Bahamians then, I mean now, but back then, they were what we call, quote unquote, stateless persons. Then you have individuals from the LGBTQ1 plus, and particularly those who are from poor communities. This list is not an exhaustive list, ladies and gentlemen, but we have migrants who are displaced by Hurricane Dorian. And this was very well seen during, it happened during September 2019. And especially on the island of Abaco, where we had a lot of shanty, we had one of the largest shanty towns in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. And you had a lot of migrants who were displaced by the hurricane, and they became victims or particularly vulnerable. And these are the set of vulnerable population here in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. Worldwide, we have 250 million or 5% of adults have used drugs. And at least once in 2015, you have 0.6% of the global adult population suffered from drug use disorder. And past year disorders, you had over 183 million for cannabis, 17 million for cocaine, 22 million for ecstasy. And this came from the UNODC World Drug Report 2017. In our Caribbean region, there was what we call a school prevalency survey, and mainly secondary school students participated in this survey. And users in that past month in current for 2010 and beyond, we had 37% of those use alcohol, 5% use cigarettes, 4% inhalants, 5% marijuana, cocaine and crack, less than 1% lifetime use. And that came from the CCAD Comparative Analysis of Student Drug Use in Caribbean Countries 2010. Furthermore, here in the Bahamas, there was what we call, again, we had most recent prevalence surveys were the youth targeted in 2011 secondary school drug survey, 2013 global school health survey, and most common drug remains alcohol. About a third drank in the past 30 days, 11 to 14% when they did this survey ever used marijuana, and 2 to 5% smoked cigarettes in the past month. And I'm just showing you these stats that actually play out in the vulnerable population in our country, that really we need to focus on prevention and intervention and take away the discrimination and stigmatization with that population. Continue. The last adult household prevalence survey was in 1991. You had from 16 to 55 years percent ever using, 74% alcohol, 39% tobacco, 14% marijuana, 6% cocaine, and 1% tranquilizer, along with 3% pills. Rates higher for young males between the ages of 18 to 29. So my friends and my colleagues, they all gave their version and their views from stigma of addiction. But let me just add to what was said earlier. Stigma is defined in the dictionary as a mark of disgrace or infamy. The stigma of addiction, the mark of disgrace or infamy associated with the disease, stems from behavioral symptoms and aspects of substance use disorder. So factors that influence stigma. We have the blame game. Oh, if you didn't drink so much, or if you didn't binge drink, you would not have gotten yourself involved with this addiction. Stereotypes of dangerousness and unpredictability. We have knowledge about mental and substance use disorder. We have contact and experience. Media portrayals, and this one thing that actually ticked me off. When I hear national media call, or we spoke with a drug addict, I say, man, I cringe when I hear these people do not use the universal language that is now using currently. It's like they still back in the 1970s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, and not using the person who has a substance use disorder. Then we have race, ethnicity, and culture. These are all factors that actually influence the stigma that my colleagues would have shared with you. You have social inclusion as well, exclusion, social rejection, and somebody else mentioned about social rejection or rejection. And I think that would have been our first speaker. Social rejection of drug use is greater than that directed at other psychiatric conditions. And our vice president actually mentioned this as well, like depression and anxiety, which may lead to social exclusion of substance use disorder. Sorry, break in transmission. My apologies. Someone just hit up and says, fix the video. Okay, good. So it should be now fixed. Good. Social rejection of drug use is greater than directed at other psychiatric conditions like depression and anxiety, which may lead to social exclusion of substance users and prevent them from seeking and receiving treatment. You also have what are the effects of stigma and discrimination? Let's look at some of the effects. Stigma and discrimination can contribute to someone's mental health problems worsening and delay them or prevent them from getting help, because you don't want somebody, especially if you came from a family that is well known publicly that, hey, I have a substance use disorder, or somebody's going to call me a stigmatic word, or he's a baser, or he's a joneser. These are all negative stigmatic words that are used for persons with substance use, and it helps prevent those individuals from receiving the necessary treatment. Social isolation, poor housing, and unemployment and poverty are all linked to mental ill health. So stigma and discrimination can trap people in a cycle of illness. And that's why you find a lot of persons who have substance use disorder now become in the homeless population. And another thing that actually peeves me, especially on the island of Grand Bahama, I see they would, and we need to find a different word for vagrants, because many persons in the law, that the word that it uses, vagrant, because there's this legal term, vagrancy, but that word is used stigmatic with those individuals who have, many of them have co-occurring disorders. And they would send them for up to Bahamas Department of Correctional Services for 3 months, and they will get no treatment, even though the magistrate would say get drug treatment, but they will just put them on the F block and they would stay there for 3 months, come back down. And I have witnesses in court just 2 weeks ago. And these persons would have other mental illness along with substance use, and they don't even understand what the charges. Only thing they could say to the magistrate or the worship, yes, boss, yes, boss, yes, boss, yes, boss. Every question that the magistrate asks. So it's like a waste of taxpayers' money just taking these persons off the street instead of finding a solution to help these persons within the community. How can we reduce stigma and addiction? Many persons already stated we can use words that can reduce addiction stigma. One way to start is by revising words and terms we use when discussing substance use disorder and the people affected by it. Research indicates that the use of person first language is essential for stigma reduction, focusing on the person and not his or her condition, and especially the person in the vulnerable communities. Okay? Because we like to say, oh, that Haitian migrant or that Haitian, that illegal Haitian. You can't be illegal Haitian. You know, they're already stigmatized from their status on immigration. And so you further stigmatize those who want to get help for their substance use disorder. So 7 things you can do to reduce stigma. Notify, educate yourself about mental illness, including substance use disorders. You had 15 minutes. We're gonna finish right now. Be aware of your attitudes and behaviors. Choose your words carefully, educate others, focus on the positive, support people, and include everyone. So in my conclusion, which was less, and I'm glad we finished now, for the vulnerable groups, those with friends and family who use drugs or neighborhoods where drugs are used need to be targeted for education and prevention. Abuse of prescription drugs does not really appear to be a problem here in the Bahamas on the data scale, but that doesn't mean it's not happening here in our community. However, as worldwide concern increases about prescription drug abuse, we must remain vigilant about local patterns of use. So we have to look at prevention in that area, and especially in our vulnerable population. Thank you. So that brings us to the end of the presented or prepared speakers for this evening. And the time now is 8:06. And so what we are going to do, we're going to leave this segment open for the next 10 minutes for questions and discussion. And I would like to kick this off by asking a question to Ms. Paulette Dean. Her topic dealt with negative impact and stigma with gambling addiction and substance use. How is there a causation for persons who have gambling disorders for using, there's a causation of them using some form of substance to mitigate against their gambling disorder? How, or are there any correlation between substance use disorder and gambling disorder? Is Paulette still with us?
Yeah, I'm still with you.
Okay,
You
go
asked
ahead.
2 questions. The
Yes.
first one was, what's the first question again?
The first question is there a correlation between gambling? I think that's what I said. Is there a correlation between gambling disorder and substance use disorder? Oh, no, that was the second question. And the first question was, is substance use disorder a precursor to gambling disorder, or gambling disorder is a precursor to substance use disorder in your research?
Okay, so answer that question. The comorbidity or the relations between both of those disorders is really high. Persons with gambling addictions, it is noted that those persons, up to 47% of persons who gamble actually have substance use disorder. So whenever we talk about addictions and we're talking about stigma and world mental health, that is why we brought in the topic of gambling addiction, because they're so closely related. Nobody knows which one caused the other, okay? Because we know that both of those are coping mechanisms. They are what how people self-medicate in order to deal with whatever challenges they have, okay? So whenever a person gamble, or because I think what you initially asked, what are some of the causes why people gamble? What gambling addiction is described as persons is another definition for gambling addiction is a temporary distraction, okay, for an unmet need, okay, an addiction. So when persons are going through a situation or challenge, they are distracted by either using the drug or using the behavior, which is gambling or any other behavioral addictions. And of course, those persons, because the degree of pleasure, and we're dealing with the pleasure center in the brain, what it does is trigger the, increases the level of dopamine, just neurotransmitter, which helps to give that person some pleasure, let them feel good for a period of time. And so that helps them to sort of temporarily forget whatever they're dealing with, their issues. Okay, so a lot of time people really drink or use drugs or whatever because they're really trying to deal with the hurt or the shame or whatever their challenge they're dealing with, which is maladaptive way, but it's just the way that some persons choose to. But definitely most persons who gamble or who drink heavily and are hospitalized, if you were to really take a history and really, because you may not get the first, truthful answer initially, but if you was to go back and really do a investigation, you'll find out that there's some degree of gambling in that particular person. Something, because there's a hidden addiction, and it's not hidden because you don't see if a person is really like drinking or whatever. You can't see that the person has an addiction physically, but it's hidden because people are ashamed and they don't want to be divulged the degree of loss that they have, and the extent of how it is affecting their lives. So they prefer to stay to themselves, okay, and they prefer not to be demeaned or even considered as a loser or waste or whatever the case may be. So I hope that answered the question, but a lot of time people gamble or people end up with addictions because they're unable to deal with the challenges, the mental, physical, and of course, social economical challenges that they're dealing with. So they use substances or behaviors to help to deter that feeling or to numb the effect of the pain.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, this other question I have for our trainer, our director in training, Brenda Smith, as it relates to prevention. What is your premier organization, Silence Rehabilitation, doing to help prepare persons to work with persons who have substance use disorder in the community or who have to come in for inpatient care? What is your institution doing in the area of education and training?
Silence Rehabilitation Center, we have various training sessions that is geared at staff, equipping them to work with in the center, because a psychiatric and substance abuse child and adolescent. We have right now we have a group of 41 registered nurses who are as psychiatric nurses. So when they're completed, they will be psychiatric nurses. They have some of them from Sandilands, Princess Margaret Hospital, and Department of Public Health. The Colombo Echo treatment, Echo training that we have, that we staff that work in the substance abuse area. We cover reducing stigma and how to stigma and discrimination. And also with that, we do have a mental health education team that goes to you can book the team comes out and we speak to any issues related to mental health. And we always speak about stigma and discrimination and measures that we want we put in place to eliminate or decrease stigma. That's so various things that we do in that. We do a lot now. We do a lot of media shows because we want to educate our staff about stigma and discrimination, because, you know, when the study that they in the hospital in Canada, it's with staff who brought a lot of stigma within their centers. So with that, we also, the community, because once the persons come for treatment, whether they're in and they go back to the community, they go back to the church they belong to, they go back to school, they go back to their place. We want to make sure that they don't guys and discriminate against.
Thank you very much. Ms. Vanessa Eloise Rule, you there? Question for you from one of the panels. The risk and safety impact of stigma and discrimination on patients. What is the role of your department that you work in? How do you play in the area of risk and safety, and how do you educate your entire staffing through the Public Hospital Authority on the discrimination or the prevention of discrimination on patients?
Okay, so my department, one of the main roles is risk and safety for all patients and employees throughout the organization. So our role is to ensure that
Don't go back inside,
is-
you've been tired there.
the patient or staff is actually in a safe environment and that they are not disenfranchised in any way, and there's no stigma behavior being displayed to them by a staff or any other persons. And when we do this, we actually enhance the patient's ability to actually be active in the programs that are being offered for recovery. And also the mechanism that we use will also protect the organization from any legal actions that the patient or staff may have evidence to bring towards the organization because of the negative behavior, non-professional behavior that may be displayed to them in the workplace.
Okay, thank you very much. Before I ask the next question, is there anyone in the chat room who have a question? Does anyone in the chat room have a question? Okay. Pamela, you there with us?
Yes, I am.
Good. I know during COVID-19, the height of the pandemic here in the Bahamas, your area was basically shut down or came to a standstill. Post-COVID, how is your area dealing with the stigma and the discrimination post-COVID?
Okay, one of the areas identified when it comes to discrimination is lack of access to healthcare. Now, with the onset of COVID, it did affect one of our facilities, the long stay unit. However, I'm very pleased to announce that as of September of this year, we will be resuming that services, okay, of the longer stay inpatient after they would have finished with the acute phase of their detoxification part of their treatment. So although we have been impacted, we have now readjusted and we continue to meet the needs of persons who are diagnosed with substance use disorder.
Awesome, awesome, good. Now there's time now is 8:18, and this actually brings us to the end of our discussion in this webinar and in the presentation. And let me just take this time out to thank each of our speakers. We had Shaniqua Smith, who's ICAP 2, just returned to the Bahamas, and she gave her best with her voice and her condition. And she's at the Community Counseling and Assessment Center and she did a wonderful job on community counseling against stigma and discrimination. We had Pamela Smith, who works in the treatment area and detoxification area. And she did a yeoman's job as it relates to Together We Can Stop Stigma and Discrimination in Substance Use Disorders Treatment Facilities. Together, each accomplished much. And we had our Assistant Secretary, Eloise Rowe, who spoke on the risk and safety impact of stigma and discrimination on patients. And she did a wonderful job. I want to thank her as well. And none other, we had the lady who was pregnant with twins. She did, and I mean, no pun upon twins, because she actually focused on two areas: the negative impact of stigma and discrimination on patients and families with gambling and substance use disorder. And she gave us an in-depth presentation on a subject matter. And then we had Brenda Smith, who is the training coordinator and liaison coordinator between the national chapter here in the Bahamas and our host organization, Sandlands Rehabilitation Center. And she dealt most succinctly with the topic Stop Stigma and Discrimination, Strengthen Prevention Through Education. And she shared how the organization is actually dealing with training professionals in the area of addiction and the area of prevention through education. And last but not least, yours truly dealt with briefly the subject matter, eliminating stigma and discrimination in vulnerable population. So I want to thank all of you who took the time out to join us on the Zoom call, as well as those of you who watch us via the Facebook live feed. I want to thank you for being here this evening. And I know we have some folks from Africa, and we had some folks from the Family Islands who participated in live, but they said they had no questions. And so I want to thank each one of my colleagues for participating. And for those of you who want to watch this again, this will be placed up on the Bahamas ISSUP page, as well as you can find it on our Facebook page, ISSUP page. And so you can rewatch the video and you can share it with your friends who did not have the opportunity to join us on this World Drug Day. And without further delay, I want to thank the whole soul for allowing us to have this World Drug Day interactive webinar. And I bid all of you a pleasant good evening, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are around the world. Thank you.
Thank you. Good
Thank
night,
you.
everyone.
Good night. Take care.
Thank you.